Good morning, everyone. Before beginning the presentation, I would like to thank the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism and the National Museum of Oman for granting permission to study the Indus-related objects discovered in the Sultanate, as well as all the teams who originally found them. A special thanks is due to Jonathan Mark Kenoyer and Sophie Mary, with whom I collaborated in producing much of the analytical data that form the basis of this presentation. Today, I address early Bronze Age long-distance interaction not as a simple movement of commodities, but as a dynamic process of circulation of objects, people, technical knowledge, and social practices. Interaction, in this sense, is never unidirectional, but involves a continuous cycle of negotiation, adaptation, and return. Drawing on the interface between the Indus region and the Oman Peninsula, I will explore how these processes operated and why they matter for understanding third millennium connectivity. The Indus civilization, or Harappan culture, represents one of the major urban traditions of the early Bronze Age, flourishing between 2600 and 1900 BCE within a highly standardized yet internally diverse urban system. Remarkably, Indus cities combined substantial infrastructural investment with a striking absence of royal tombs and explicit representations of ruling elites. Authority appears to have been distributed across multiple coexisting institutions, pointing to a hierarchical organization rather than a centralized state model. Within this framework, specialized craft traditions and a writing system primarily for administration developed in close association with long-distance exchange. To understand these external relations, the Indus-Arabian connection must be situated within the broader Middle Asian interaction sphere, linking the Indus Valley with Iran, Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and the Oman Peninsula. Within this space, maritime and overland routes enabled the circulation of commodities, technical knowledge, and shared practices. It was precisely this high degree of institutional coherence that allowed the Indus system to sustain structured interaction across such vast distances. External exchange was an integral pillar of the Harappan economy, managed via shared administrative tools. These networks indicate a structured system rather than episodic contact. A crucial step in understanding this interaction is recognizing the movement of craftspeople, not only finished objects. Technological analysis of carnelian beads from Mesopotamia demonstrated that distinctive Indus techniques can be identified well beyond the Indus Valley. In several cases, these signatures occur on local-style materials, indicating that production itself was relocated. This provides clear evidence that skilled Indus craftspeople and their technical knowledge moved across regions during the second half of the 3rd millennium BCE. Comparable mechanisms are visible in different regions linked with Indus external trade. In Central Asia, artifacts made from Asian elephant ivory were produced locally using Indus-derived technical knowledge. This evidence shows that itinerant craftspeople reworked non-local materials according to local demands, confirming that technological relocation and re-embedding were recurrent features of long-distance interaction. This mobility of craftspeople generated hybrid material forms shaped through active cultural negotiation. Objects combining Indus technological traditions with local stylistic choices demonstrate that interaction did not involve passive reception, but the selective reworking of external knowledge within locally meaningful social frameworks. Long-distance exchange in the Indus world was governed through an administrative system designed to regulate identification, control, and accountability across distance. While external trade initially used standard Indus seals, the system was progressively reconfigured with new categories of seals explicitly adapted to foreign administrative environments. This hybridization took various forms. In some regions, writing was adapted for the seals to function within local bureaucratic systems, as seen in these Indus-style seals bearing inscriptions in Sumero-Akkadian cuneiform and linear Elamite. In other contexts, seals retained the Indus script while adopting local seal morphologies and translating iconography into regional visual languages. A significant systemic shift occurred around 2300 BCE with the sudden appearance of Indus-style round stamp seals bearing the Indian bison motif. This seal type was clearly designed for external trade. Remarkably, the Indian bison or short-horned bull characterizes over 65% of Indus-related seals found outside the Indus Valley, but only 4% within it, suggesting that it was the symbol of Indus individuals acting specifically in external trade. These seals were manufactured locally according to shared Indus conventions, forming consistent regional groups. Alongside seals, standardized weights introduce quantification into external trade, showing direct metrological equivalence with other local weight systems. Together, these tools reveal a decentralized yet rule-based system of governance, allowing exchange to operate across culturally diverse regions. In this framework, the Oman Peninsula, known as the Land of Magan in the cuneiform texts of the later 3rd millennium, offers an exceptional empirical setting in which to test how this system of Indus external trade operated in practice. Here, interaction can be examined at multiple levels, allowing locally produced materials to be distinguished from imports through technological, compositional, and stylistic analysis. Oman therefore functions not simply as a recipient region, but as a laboratory in which the mechanisms of circulation, adaptation, and governance can be observed in concrete archaeological terms. Archaeological research across the Oman Peninsula has revealed a dense, coherent assemblage of Indus-related material culture, including pottery, metal tools, stone and ivory ornaments, but also seals and weights. Rather than occasional imports, these objects form structured groups associated with production, administration, and daily use, pointing to sustained interaction. This pattern is especially clear in the ceramic record, dominated by diagnostic forms like large black-slipped storage jars, decorated jars, perforated jars, pedestal dishes, and cooking pots. These vessels occur at both coastal settlements and inland sites. Most striking is their abundance. At some sites, approximately 70% of the ceramic assemblage is Indus-related, a frequency with no parallel in other regions of Western and Central Asia, where Indus pottery is virtually absent. This anomaly is best explained at a systemic level. Exchange with the Oman Peninsula likely involved large quantities of staple commodities requiring specific containers. However, this explanation does not fully account for the evidence. In fact, geochemical and technological analysis demonstrated that, in addition to imports, many Indus ceramic types discovered in Oman were made from local clay wares using distinctive Indus shaping techniques. These vessels were not merely visually copied but represent embodied technical gestures and firing routines transmitted through apprenticeship. Their consistent discovery points to the sustained presence in Oman of potters trained within Indus traditions. The record thus documents not imitation, but the movement of skills and specialized craft persons along these trade networks. A revealing case is provided by the so-called Indus bottles, a small group of carinated vessels with black-painted Indus-style motifs found in Umanar funerary contexts, which show no parallels within the Indus Valley. Although their unusual morphology once suggested local imitation, provenance analyses show they were manufactured in Lower Sind. Unlike the pottery discussed earlier, these were not produced in Oman but were deliberately conceived and exported from the Indus Valley for the local market. Their presence documents a proactive, market-oriented production based on the anticipation of foreign demand. Once Indus ceramic technologies were shown to operate locally, pottery could no longer be treated as an isolated case. Excavations at sites like Salat, Bat, and Dawa reveal assemblages where Indus-related objects occur alongside local productions across several material categories. This allows us to examine interaction as a cross-sectoral process, showing how Indus material culture became deeply embedded within domestic, productive, and funerary practices. Salat provides particularly clear evidence for the social dimension of the Indus presence in Oman. Alongside trade materials, the site yielded Indus-style objects linked to play, domestic routines, and everyday interaction. Their presence shows that Indus material culture extended into the sphere of daily life, indicating a sustained engagement and the reproduction of familiar practices. This points to the presence of people and households rather than transient trading episodes. Sites in Oman also revealed objects linked to the administrative management of exchange. Indus seals bearing the Indian bison, the emblem of external trade, have been found across the peninsula. Many were produced locally using local stones, yet carved according to Indus conventions, indicating controlled reproduction within a shared framework. This institutional dimension is explicit at ST1, where, in addition to the discovery of an Indus seal exceptionally made from chlorite, a local jar preserves impressions of an Indus-inscribed tablet stamped before firing. The vessel is local, but the motif and writing derive from Indus practice, showing that identification devices were integrated into local production. This provides evidence for an operational interface, marking a transition from exchange to institutional coordination. Among the most significant finds from Oman is a silver ring from Dawa bearing the image of an Indus-style Indian bison, the emblem of Harappan's involved in external trade. Its importance derives from the deliberate combination of elements. While the ring's form follows regional Mesopotamian traditions, its iconography remains unequivocally Industry. Furthermore, analyses reveal that the silver likely originates from Anatolia rather than Arabia or South Asia. Shape, iconography, and material thus converge in a negotiated material expression, in which Indus symbols were embedded within forms harmonizing superregional, quasi-global cultural expressions, offering a clear synthesis of how cross-cultural interaction operated through the selective recomposition of meaning. On the basis of the evidence discussed so far, Indus external trade can be analytically deconstructed into a coherent set of key features grouped into three closely interrelated domains. The administrative management is characterized by standardized administrative tools, such as seals, weights, and metrological systems, shared across regions. By a distributed and rule-based system of control enabling accountability across long distances. By emblematic iconographies explicitly signaling trade functions abroad. And by the adaptation of Indus identification devices to foreign administrative environments. The marketing strategy is defined by the tailoring of objects to local consumption practices, by the deliberate design of commodities for specific regional markets, by the anticipation of foreign demand, by the selective deployment of locally intelligible forms and symbols, and by the systematic production of negotiated hybrid forms as a strategic outcome rather than an incidental byproduct. The production and technological organization is marked by the mobility of craftspeople rather than the mere circulation of finished goods, and by the relocation of production through the use of local raw materials combined with Indus technical traditions. Taken together, these features indicate the deliberate implementation of a superregional marketing strategy driven by a prototypical globalizing vision. Within this explicit theoretical framework, concepts drawn from the social sciences can be employed as heuristic tools to describe the foundational features of a Bronze Age marketing system, rather than its detailed operational mechanisms. In this context, the concepts of globalization and glocalization are especially relevant, as they allow us to describe the structural dynamics through which economic systems maintain coherence across distance. In simple terms, globalization generates and maintains standardization as services and products expand beyond domestic markets. Instead, glocalization adapts services and products to the tastes and practices of foreign markets, either proactively or through the creation of local subsidiaries. So, globalizing dynamics therefore create structural coherence across distant regions, enable shared standards and practices, and reduce the isolation of local systems. On the other hand, glocalization maintains and intensifies local variation, produce hybrid outcomes rather than universal replicas, and negotiate cross-cultural interactions between economic and socio-technical players. When the key features of Indus external trade are assessed in relation to the foundational characteristics of globalizing and glocalizing dynamics, a clear pattern emerges. Services and administrative management of Indus external trade are structured according to a strongly globalizing logic, designed to ensure procedural coherence, accountability, and interoperability across superregional networks, even though their concrete application could be locally translated or hybridized. By contrast, marketing strategy is clearly glocalized, as services and commodities were deliberately adapted to the tastes, practices, and symbolic languages of foreign markets, often through the production of negotiated hybrid forms. This configuration is further reinforced by the organization of craft productions linked to external trade, which acted as the practical interface between standardized procedures and locally embedded practices. To summarize, evidence from the Oman Peninsula contributes to revealing an external trade system structured around globally standardized administrative practices, strongly localized marketing strategies, and a flexible organization of production that mediated between these two dimensions. This configuration allowed the Indus system to operate coherently across superregional networks while remaining responsive to local markets, practices, and constraints, resulting in durable and negotiated forms of interaction rather than episodic exchange. To conclude, I would like to return to the title of this presentation and, in particular, to the question mark that closes it. The evidence discussed today clearly demonstrates that interaction between the Indus region and the Oman Peninsula was not limited to the circulation of commodities, but involved the movement of skills, technologies, and administrative practices into southeastern Arabia. Archaeological data suggests the existence of stable, locally embedded operational hubs, enduring interfaces between Indus systems and the regional market that go well beyond the model of itinerant merchants or episodic craft mobility, and that may be described, in modern heuristic terms, as functional equivalents of foreign subsidiaries. What remains fundamentally unresolved, however, is the extent to which these movements also implied durable social return, integration, or reproduction in the opposite direction. Whether Indus individuals or groups remained embedded within local communities over multiple generations, whether such presences involved intermarriage and cultural hybridization or long-term settlement, or whether they ultimately resulted in forms of return, cannot yet be demonstrated archaeologically. The absence of evidence for culturally segregated enclaves nevertheless points toward negotiated and integrated forms of coexistence, rather than asymmetrical or extractive interaction. In this sense, the question mark is not a rhetorical flourish, but an opening onto an array of possibilities and a deeply complex social landscape. Thank you very much.